They like to tell the story of the American West as if it was built only by gunmen and outlaws. But the truth is far more uncomfortable, because the West did not survive because of chaos. It survived because a few men refused to become part of it, and Charles Goodnight was one of those men. A man who stared straight into the most brutal frontier America had ever known, and decided that order, discipline, and endurance would outlast violence every single time. Charles Goodnight was born in 1836, before the West became a legend and long before it became a myth. He grew up in a country that was still raw, unstable, and unforgiving, where survival depended not on reputation, but on preparation. As a boy, he learned to ride, to shoot, to work cattle, and to read the land the way other men read books. The frontier was not romantic to him. It was dangerous, and that understanding shaped every decision he would make for the rest of his life. When most men chased opportunity westward, they found chaos. Bandits, hostile territory, starvation, and endless uncertainty. Goodnight found responsibility. He worked as a ranch hand, a scout, and a guide, learning the brutal geography of Texas and the Great Plains. He did not seek fame. He sought efficiency. He understood that the West did not reward reckless courage. It rewarded men who could endure longer than everyone else. The Civil War changed everything. Like many frontier men, Goodnight was pulled into a conflict that tore the nation apart. But unlike others, he did not emerge from the war addicted to violence. He emerged with a deeper understanding of logistics, leadership, and survival under pressure. He saw firsthand what happened when discipline collapsed. He saw men die not because they were weak, but because systems failed. That lesson would define his legacy. After the war, America faced a problem no gunfighter could solve. Millions of cattle roamed Texas, worthless where they stood, but desperately needed in the north. The trails north were deadly. Native territory, hostile weather, disease, rustlers, and exhaustion wiped out most attempts before they ever succeeded. Many tried. Most failed. Charles Goodnight saw what others missed, that the problem was not courage, it was organization. He co-founded what would become the Goodnight Loving Trail, one of the most dangerous and important cattle routes in American history. This was not a journey for glory. It was a test of leadership stretched over months of hunger, sleepless nights, and constant threat. Goodnight enforced discipline with absolute authority. No drunkenness, no unnecessary gunfire, no shortcuts. Men who broke rules endangered everyone. And Goodnight understood that chaos spreads faster than disease. Along the trail, Goodnight faced everything the West could throw at a man. Stampedes, attacks, blizzard cold and desert heat. Men died. Animals died. Yet the trail held, not because Goodnight was ruthless, but because he was relentless. He planned for disaster before it happened. He built systems for survival. He treated discipline as a weapon more powerful than any revolver. What made Charles Goodnight extraordinary was not that he avoided violence, but that he refused to worship it. He negotiated when possible. He defended himself when necessary, but he never confused bloodshed with strength. In a West addicted to bravado, Goodnight proved that leadership was quieter, heavier, and far more difficult. As cattle reached markets and fortunes were made, Goodnight did not celebrate recklessly. He reinvested. He built ranches. He introduced better breeding. He brought structure to a land that had survived too long without it. While outlaws burned fast and died young, Goodnight built something that would outlive him. Yet his greatest challenge was not the land. It was the men. Men who wanted shortcuts. Men who wanted glory. Men who believed the West should belong to whoever could take it by force. Goodnight stood against them, not with speeches, but with standards that did not bend. And that made him enemies, because nothing threatens chaos more than consistency. And Charles Goodnight was about to prove that the hardest battles of the Old West were not fought with guns, fought with discipline. As Charles Goodnight pushed cattle north along the Goodnight Loving Trail, the West revealed its true face. Not the one told in stories, but the one that crushed men slowly, day after day, mile after mile. This was not a journey defined by single heroic moments, but by endless pressure, hunger, fatigue, fear. A trail where mistakes did not create drama, they created graves. Goodnight understood this with brutal clarity. And because he understood it, he ruled his crews with a firmness that many men mistook for cruelty. until they realized that his discipline was the only thing standing between them and death. The trail crossed lands no one truly controlled, native territories where tension could turn deadly in seconds, open plains where a single thunderstorm could stampede thousands of cattle into chaos, rivers that looked calm until they swallowed men, horses, and livelihoods whole, nights where wolves circled and days where the sun burned skin raw. There was no cavalry coming, no law to appeal to. Out there, leadership was the only currency that mattered. Goodnight enforced order through routine. Men woke at the same time. Watches were rotated with precision. Weapons were kept clean but never drawn without cause. Alcohol was restricted, because Goodnight knew that bravado and liquor killed faster than bullets. Every rule had a reason, and every reason had been written in blood somewhere along the trail. When a man challenged his authority, Goodnight did not argue. He removed the problem. Weak links endangered the entire chain. What separated Goodnight from tyrants was that he shared the burden. He rode the longest hours. He took the worst positions during river crossings. He stood watch when others slept. Men noticed this. They might resent his rules, but they trusted him because he never demanded a sacrifice he was unwilling to make himself. In the West, that kind of leadership was rare and invaluable. Violence did find the trail, as it always did. Rustlers tested the herd. Desperate men tried to steal cattle under cover of darkness. In those moments, Goodnight acted decisively, but never recklessly. He used force when necessary, not to intimidate, but to end threats quickly before they escalated. His goal was not domination, it was survival. That distinction saved lives. If this story is pulling you in, this is a good moment to support it. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and comment below whether you think the West was built more by gunfighters or by men who knew how to control chaos. As the trail succeeded, word spread. Investors took notice. Ranchers followed Goodnight's methods. The Goodnight-loving trail became proof that the West could be mastered without surrendering to savagery. It showed that systems could tame wilderness where brute force had failed. And that success made Charles Goodnight powerful in a way most frontier men never were. But power attracts resistance. Not everyone welcomed structure. Some men thrived on disorder. Rustlers, opportunists, and reckless cowhands hated Goodnight because he represented limits. He represented accountability. In a land where many believed freedom meant doing whatever you wanted, Goodnight proved that freedom without order collapsed into ruin. Conflicts followed him. Threats were whispered. Attempts were made to undermine his authority. But Goodnight did not bend. He expanded his operations, built ranches, introduced innovations in cattle breeding, and laid foundations that would last generations. While others chased quick profit, Goodnight played a long game, understanding that endurance, not speed, decided who truly conquered the West. Yet the more he built, the more isolated he became. Discipline creates distance. Respect does not always bring affection. Goodnight accepted this price. He knew that leadership was lonely by design, and in that loneliness, he prepared for the next phase of his life. One where the greatest challenges would no longer come from the land, but from people determined to resist change. Because taming the wilderness was hard. As Charles Goodnight's influence expanded across the plains, a quiet but dangerous shift began to take place around him. The West was changing, but not everyone wanted that change. For men who lived comfortably in chaos, order felt like oppression. Goodnight was no longer just a cattleman or trail boss. He had become a symbol of discipline in a land addicted to improvisation, and symbols attract opposition. Ranchers who cut corners resented him. Cowhands who thrived on drinking, gambling, and drifting hated his rules. Rustlers saw his organized herds as challenges. Even some settlers believed Goodnight's methods were too rigid, too controlling for a frontier that prided itself on freedom. But Goodnight understood something most of them did not. Freedom without structure always ends the same way, in collapse. As he built large ranching operations, Goodnight invested in land, water sources, and better cattle. He introduced innovations that increased efficiency and reduced loss, not through luck, but through planning, fencing, selective breeding, winter preparation. These were revolutionary ideas in a world that still believed survival depended on brute force. His success proved that the frontier could be transformed into something stable, and stability threatens those who profit from disorder. Conflicts escalated quietly at first. Fence lines were cut, cattle disappeared, threats were delivered indirectly, through rumors and intimidation. Goodnight responded the same way he always had, methodically. He reinforced operations, adjusted routes, and removed unreliable men from positions of trust. He did not react emotionally. He treated conflict as a logistical problem, and that made him frustratingly difficult to defeat. Yet the greatest cost of Goodnight's approach was not financial or physical. It was personal. Leadership hardened him. Years of constant vigilance, decision-making under pressure, and responsibility for other men's lives stripped away any illusion of comfort. He trusted few people fully. Relationships were transactional, built on reliability rather than warmth. Respect came easily. Companionship did not. The same discipline that kept his operations alive kept people at a distance. The West often celebrates independence, but Goodnight understood the darker truth. Independence is lonely. When you refuse to follow the crowd, you walk alone by definition. And as his reputation grew, so did the gap between him and the men around him. They obeyed him. They relied on him. But they did not always understand him. The death of Oliver Loving, his close partner and friend, hit Goodnight harder than any ambush or storm ever had. Loving was more than a business associate. He was one of the few men who truly understood Goodnight's vision. Losing him forced Goodnight to confront something he had avoided for years: the emotional cost of building something larger than yourself. The trail survived. The operation continued, but something essential was gone. Despite this loss, Goodnight did not retreat. He expanded further, adapting once again as the frontier evolved. Railroads reached deeper into cattle country. Markets shifted. The open range slowly disappeared. Many men who had thrived in the early days collapsed under these changes. Goodnight did not. He had never relied on chaos. He had relied on foresight, and foresight aged better than bravado. Still, resistance never fully vanished. The West may have been tamed on paper, but old habits died slowly. Men tested boundaries. Violence lingered on the edges. Goodnight remained firm, knowing that consistency was the only language disorder ever truly understood. He enforced standards even when it made him unpopular, because he had learned something crucial early in life. Being liked does not build civilizations. Being reliable does. By the time Goodnight reached the later years of his life, the land around him no longer resembled the frontier he had first crossed. Towns stood where open plains once stretched endlessly. Fences replaced trails. Law replaced improvisation. And in those changes, his influence was visible everywhere, even if few people recognized it. Yet Goodnight himself remained largely unchanged. He did not seek monuments. He did not chase public praise. He continued working, managing, and guiding until age and time finally slowed him. The West had moved forward, but it had moved forward on foundations he helped lay. And that is when the final question emerged. What happens to a man who spends his entire life building order, when the world finally becomes orderly? When Charles Goodnight reached the final chapters of his life, the American West no longer resembled the land that had tested him to the edge of survival. The open plains had been carved into ranches. Trails that once swallowed men whole had become mapped routes. Towns stood where chaos once ruled unchecked. And yet, beneath every fence line, every herd, every functioning system of order, there was a trace of Goodnight's philosophy. Discipline before bravado, preparation before reaction, endurance before glory. Unlike the outlaws and gunmen whose names echoed loudly through history, Goodnight's influence worked quietly. He did not leave behind dramatic shootouts or legends frozen in a single violent moment. He left behind systems that lasted, ranching operations that survived winters, standards that shaped generations of cattlemen, a blueprint for turning wilderness into something sustainable without surrendering to savagery. In a West obsessed with speed and spectacle, Goodnight proved that patience could outlast both. As age finally caught up to him, Goodnight did not cling to the past. He did not romanticize the frontier or mourn its passing. He understood that the goal had never been to preserve chaos, but to outgrow it. The West had served its purpose as a proving ground. It had broken men who mistook recklessness for strength and elevated those who understood restraint. Goodnight belonged firmly in the second group. His later years were marked by reflection rather than regret. He had seen too much death to fear it, too much failure to worship success. What mattered to him was continuity, that the land continued to produce, that men learned to work within systems instead of against them. That order did not collapse the moment a strong personality disappeared. That was his quiet victory. History, however, is not kind to builders who do not seek attention. While figures like Jesse James, Billy the Kid, and Wild Bill Hickok became symbols of rebellion and violence, Charles Goodnight remained largely absent from popular imagination. And yet, without men like him, those legends would have existed in a vacuum, surrounded by collapse instead of context. Goodnight represented the backbone of the frontier, unseen, uncelebrated, but essential. What his life reveals about America is deeply instructive. Nations are not sustained by chaos, even when chaos is romanticized. They are sustained by people willing to do repetitive, thankless work day after day, enforcing standards long after the excitement fades. Goodnight enforced those standards when no one was watching, when there were no crowds, and when failure meant starvation rather than embarrassment. He died in 1929 at the age of 93, having lived long enough to see the world he helped build fully replace the one that tried to destroy him. Few men in frontier history can claim that kind of completion. He did not burn bright and vanish. He endured. And in the American story, endurance is the most difficult form of courage. If this story made you reconsider what real strength in the Old West looked like, take a moment now. Leave a like to support honest American history. Subscribe to the channel for more stories that go beyond guns and legends. And comment below. Do you believe the West was built more by discipline or by violence? Because long after the gunshots fade, what remained is what was built to last.